Hey there, Darksiders. We're back for a fantastic 2021, and we're focusing this episode on magic wands. Here are just a few. I have many in my shop in various phases of production, but these are some that fit here nicely on my bench that I thought I would use as examples to talk to you about technique. A magic wand basically consists of several parts. You've got the tip. You've got your ornate decorations, however you feel like doing those. You've got a haft or a handle, and then you've got a base. In this case, I've got a citrine tip. I have been carving the crap out of the ornate section in order to inset some various stones along this flat portion. I think that'll be super cool. And then I have wrapped the handle in a gold and white thread, which is just beautiful. For the base on this one, I've got this gorgeous shell that I picked up at an awesome store up in Northern California called Stories in Stone. If you ever find yourself in the Sierra Nevadas near a town called Angel Camp, you'd better pop into this store because it's amazing. And it has essentially anything you'd ever want from a crystal or fossil-based perspective. Let's see, this stone is actually called, and I keep these tags so that I can remember, an apple murex philonatus pomum from the West Indies. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. But anyway, that's this stone. And all three of these wands are actually made out of mulberry from the tree in my front yard, which is one of the most magical trees in the world. Here you can see a Lemurian crystal mounted in some mulberry with a nice black leather wrapping. And this one I chose to do a contrast of metal. I've got steel and aluminum contrasted with the mulberry. At any rate, you can do whatever you want. This is the fun kind of project where you can pick and choose the things that mean the most to you. But these are just examples. What we're going to do here in this video is start a wand from scratch. And I went on to Thingiverse because I wanted to pick out some new bases that I could 3D print and incorporate that kind of stuff into my magic wands. And I did this primarily because I was going to make one for my niece, who is featured in the promo, the theme for these videos, next to my awesome wife. And this is the base I picked out for her. It's the same raven skull that I used for the Diaval cane, except this one is about 50% scale compared to that one, which was at 100%. And I'm going to make this into a wand, probably off camera, because it's a personal thing for a personal person, and I'm not really into filming those kind of things. But for this video, I found another cool base, and I will link where I found this below, and the artist, the designer and everything. This is actually a Cobra Head. It comes in one piece, but I printed it in two parts because I'm going to want to add some electronics to this. I want to make his eyes light up. But this is super cool, and I really think that this will make an awesome base for a wand where you can grab the haft and the snake's head will wrap around the little finger like this. I just think this would be really ridiculously cool. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to work on this in today's video and add some electronics to it. We're going to do some painting. We're going to pick the tip. We're going to pick the wood and carve everything to spec. So here we go. Magic wands. Let's do this. All right, so let's begin. The first thing I want to do is open up the eye portion, and I've printed these in PLA, polylactic acid, and there are a number of ways you could do this. You could take a tiny little drill bit and get in there and hollow out the details you wanted. You could use a Dremel or a small reciprocating tool with the right bit to get in there, but I find with PLA, the way that I like to work with it, with really soft, delicate touches, is to use a heat source. So I've got a soldering iron with an old tip that I no longer care too much about, and I'm going to use that for this particular task. So here we go. All right, so as you can see, it really doesn't take much to open that eye hole up. You can really see the light shining through the back. So I'm going to do the same to the other side, and then what we'll do is we'll proceed to open up the back so that we can get into the hollow portion. I printed these with 0% infill, so the inside of these pieces is entirely hollow, and that will help for the refraction of light, and it will give me some space to embed some LEDs behind these eyes and to put the wires through. So here we go, let's do the next one. All right, these both look pretty even. Time to move on to the next phase. Okay, so next steps for this piece, we're going to go ahead and hollow out the back. I have taken a lead pencil and have drawn where I'm going to carve out the back of both sides, space for the LED, and then space for the wiring on both sides. So yeah, let's do that next. Right, so next up, let's talk a little bit about our electrics that are going to go inside this housing. Obviously, it's COVID, so I'm not going to run to the store to buy new things. So I raided my LED stash that I've got here in the shop, and this is what I have available to work with. Initially, I was thinking about that red eyes would look cool, and then I thought green eyes would look cool, because this is going to be a really natural, nature-esque kind of wand. And then I also have a blue option, and then these look white or clear, but they're actually also blue when you light them up and power them with battery. So I've got two different options of blue. And then I've got yellow, and the more I think about it, I think I'm going to add some green coloring to the snake itself, to the cobra, so I'm going to go ahead and use yellow for the eyes. And what I want to do is use these smaller two LEDs for the eyes, and then one of these larger LEDs is going to go up into the wand tip to light up the crystal or whatever it is I decide to mount up there when we get to that phase. So I'm going to go ahead and design our circuit next. I have tested all of these LEDs. They're all 3-volt LEDs with a little disc battery, which is probably not what I will end up using just due to its shape and size, really, in the end wand product. But I did use it to test the circuit, and I'm going to go ahead and build the circuit with these two small yellow LEDs and one large one for the tip, and let's do that next. So for these particular LEDs, you have two wires that are coming off of the diode, and the longer wire is your positive, and the shorter wire is your negative. I am using a red wire to represent my positive and a black to represent my negative, as is often done. And I'm going to actually have two segments to this circuit because it's a wand. The eyes will obviously be in the base, mounted into the Cobra Head, and the larger LED will be up in the tip. So I'm going to set this aside for now and work on the two eyes and develop this half of the circuit here. All right, cool. So at this point, I have soldered my LEDs, the positive and negative connections, and then I covered them in some hot glue just to make sure that they don't touch each other when I mount them inside the Cobra Head base. So what we're going to do at this point, before we move any further in the circuit, is just to test these LEDs to make sure that they're wired properly according to plan and that they are functional. So I'm going to place my positive wire on my positive side of my battery and my negative wire on my negative side of my battery. I'm just going to hold it on there with my hands. It's very low voltage, not going to hurt me. And hopefully you can see this on camera. Both of my LEDs have lit up quite well. So this is good to proceed to the next phase. All right, so before I go ahead and embed my LEDs for the eyes into the base, I want to go ahead and give this a base coat of paint so that I don't have to worry about getting that paint onto my LEDs. So as you can see, I have a whole spectrum of greens lined up here from my spray paint shelf. This is just the stuff that I had in stock, and I think it's going to work great. I've got a darker hunter green. It's a gloss protective enamel from Rust-Oleum. I've got a hammered green that actually makes plastic materials look like metal, and that's pretty neat. I've also got a stained glass, which is bright and reflective, and also a really cool look to put on things. And then I've got this really neat one that's glow in the dark, and it kind of takes several applications of this on top of another coat. It's a bit of a translucent paint, but once you build up a good layer on it, it really does provide a pretty good glow in the dark. You've got to leave it in the sunlight or next to a lamp when you want to charge it up, and then it goes for a good hour or so at night, and that gives a pretty cool look too. So we're going to use all of these and complement to each other. I've also, in my color palette, I've got an oil rubbed bronze, which I think could be cool somewhere in here. And then I've got a couple of metallic copper sprays. This one is a copper rose, and I think that a copper look in contrast with the green and the yellows will look pretty cool too. So here we go. We're just going to start by giving this a little bit of a base coat with the darker greens, and then I can go ahead and embed my electrics, and I can polish up and assemble the Cobra Head into one and finish the paint job from there, covering up my LEDs to make sure that they don't get any extra spray on them at that stage. Here we go. All right, let's start with our darkest hunter green base coat. Right, so while that paint dries up, I'm going to go ahead and wire up the larger LED that I'm going to use for the wand's tip. Alright, cool. I'm pretty happy with the way the base coat came out on these. Next, I'm going to use the hammered spray, but only for this particular portion in the underneath of the hood. I want to give that a little bit of texture that I think this hammered spray will provide quite nicely, in addition to the texture that's already there from the print. So I'm going to tape it up so that's the only portion that really gets hit, and we'll do the next coat. So I was going through my various piles of wood. I have a lot of different kinds of wood in different sections of my shop for different purposes, and I came across this piece of silver birch, and it really struck me the way that the bark is starting to flake off of here. That it was just like a snake skin, a snake shedding its skin, and this is like the inside core of a snake, and this is the skin coming out. Anyway, it really felt like it was the right pick for this particular wand, so I'm going to use it. This silver birch actually came from our wedding. We harvested several different birch trees to make various decorations for our wedding several years ago, and this piece has been laying around in a pile ever since. It was just unused, and now it's time for it to find a good home. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the rest of the snake skin, the bark, off of this, and then I'm going to cut the piece that I want so that I can start to work with it. Here we go. So of course, I'm going to keep all this birch bark because you never know when it may come in handy for another project later, or maybe even for this project before all is said and done. But this is about the right size I'm looking for here. It's still a little long, but if I start to feel it like a wand and hold it like a wand, it's got a nice curve to it back here in the haft portion. I'm actually going to replace the haft portion with a different material and combine it. So what I'm really looking for here is like just forward of the haft to about where I want the tip, and that's the piece I'm going to cut out of this next. Okay, these are now dry enough to unwrap and take a look at. So this is great. I've got a really good contrast here between these two colors. You can see it in the head versus the underside, and in the textures as well, which doesn't quite play on camera, but is really evident in person. So before I do any more painting on this, I'm actually going to go ahead and embed the LEDs and the wiring for this part, and then I'm going to join them together because I actually want to seal up this seam in between it and hide it so that it's not so prevalent before I do further painting here on the backside. Okay, so while this glue dries and the whole thing comes together, I'm going to go ahead along the back side here. You can see that there's a bit of a split, and I'm going to fill that in to make it all completely one piece. And to do that, I'm going to use Ready Patch. It dries quickly, it is easily sandable, and it takes paint really well.
Turn me
Okay, so this is set for a couple hours now, and while I can tell that the ready patch probably isn't fully cured yet, I left a little bit out from that same batch so that I could smush it and see when it was fully dry. It's pretty close to dry, and I know that the super glue I applied is dry by now. Right, I'm going to go ahead and take the clamps off. So yeah, this actually came out pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and take a fine tool, and I'm going to clean up some of the ready patch that I put on that doesn't really need to be there. Overall, I did a pretty clean job with the application, but there are just a few places where I want to clean that up. And you can do this like with, you know, a fine flathead screwdriver, or really any tool of your choice that can get into the cracks. But I'm going to use a dental pick, which I think is the best tool for the job. Okay, so next up, we're going to go ahead and start to formulate the base of the wand. Up towards the tip, I'm going to use this piece of wood, but towards the base as a joining piece and as an area to mount my electrics and my switch, I'm going to use a piece of metal, and I actually really like this piece of black tarnished aluminum. I could have used either this piece of steel or this piece of brushed aluminum, but I really like this black piece, and I'm going to go ahead and use it. It fits really nicely and allows me to thread my wires through. And that's going to go out to about here and allow me to embed my switch. For this switch, I've chosen a temporary just push button on off switch. So when you push it in, it engages, and when you let it go, it disengages. And the plan here is to embed it in the rod connected to the electric circuit, and then wrap a leather wrapping around this portion so that the switch is mostly hidden, and squeezing the leather portion will activate the wand's eyes and tip. So first things first, I've found the point on my cylinder here where I would like the switch to be mounted face up, so the switch side pointing out, and I've marked that with a lead pencil for drilling. And the next thing I want to do, this switch, most of it is going to be inside this rod. Exposed will be the switch itself, this washer, and this nut. So what I'm going to do is take the washer and nut off. I'm going to get out my trusty calipers here, and I'm going to measure the gauge of exactly how big of a hole I need in order for only the shaft to emerge from my drill bit hole. And it looks like we're at 3/8 of an inch. So I will get a 3/8 inch drill bit, and we'll go to work on this metal rod. So the back of my switch, obviously, is a bit fatter than the front. So on one side of this hole, I'm going to widen it up. And instead of doing that with another drill bit, I'm going to go in with my Dremel, and I'm just going to cut a wider section just in the back. Right, now we can mount the switch inside the rod. Okay, so next I'm going to reassemble this so that I can figure out where I'm going to cut this portion of the metal tube. Then I'm going to give this back side a paint job, and I'm going to start drilling out my wire hole here in the wood portion of the wand. So earlier you saw me test my LEDs with this big disc button cell battery, and it's obviously way too big to fit inside my wand. So what I've done is raided my battery supply, and I've found tiny little button batteries. I think these are made for hearing aids. I'm really not sure, but they're super tiny, and they're 1.5 volts each. So using 2 of them, I can create 3 volts, which is enough to power my LEDs. In order to mount them, I needed a custom battery mount. So what I did is I designed one in Blender, and I printed it on my 3D printer. Cool, this looks great. So I'm going to go ahead and strip the tape here, and then I'm going to retape it so that I can hit just the base here. Okay, so before I mount my batteries, I'm going to go ahead and wire up my switch. I've got my positive wire coming from my main larger LED at the tip, running out, and it's going to solder to one side of the switch. On the other side of the switch, I'm going to wire another red wire and run it out the back here. So we'll have both a black and a red running out through the back with the switch in the middle for interrupt purposes. Cool, let's unwrap our package. Right, so I'm back and forth on this whole red wire thing. Now I'm realizing, even though I do want it to run outside so that I can mount the battery pack on the inside, I also want the Cobra mount to go over this tube that it fits perfectly over. And so I'm going to put a little notch in the tube right here so that I can fit the red wire in at the last moment, and hopefully get the battery pack inside it so that there's just a little bit of clearance for the wire to go inside and for the Cobra Head to slide on top. Let's see if it works. Right, so I did a quick test fit of my battery pack holder, and it is just barely going to fit in there. I mean, the tolerance is basically nothing. And so what I'm going to do is cut a notch into that too, so that I can lay the wire on top of that in the notch, and everything should fit snugly. So I came out to test my circuit before final assembly here, and it turns out the switch was bad. It just wasn't working at all. Good thing I have like 100 of these things. They're real cheap, so I swapped it out for another one, and that one seems to be working, so now we can proceed. So we're in final assembly, and I tested the circuit one more time, this time with both the tip LED and the eyes LED all at once, and I had a fail. And I finally figured it's because I need 4 batteries, not just 2. There just wasn't enough wattage in the 2 batteries in order to fire both of the LEDs in the eyes and the tip LED at the same time. Individually, the eyes or the tip were lighting up with 2, but it takes 4 to power both at once. So I have redesigned and reprinted my battery mount to be double long to hold 4 batteries, and now I'm going to remount them and then put everything together and give it a test. Well, this was a lot more trouble than I thought it was going to be, but in the end, I think it's worth it because it's super freaking cool. So what we're going to do after this step is to do the finishing work. We're going to wrap the handle. We're going to add the tip. We're going to make it pretty, but it is now functional. Pow! Pow! It's pretty neat, huh? Pow? I don't know what pow is, but I'm pretty stoked that the eyes of the snake light up and that the wand tip is going to light up when we set it. So here we go. The guts are all in, and I've hot glued it together, so if I do need to change the batteries at some point in the future, I'm gonna have to just cut that hot glue and pop the whole thing open. It is spring-loaded, so that makes it easy. But yeah, electrics are done, and we're moving on to the making it pretty phase. So I've got some various materials here that I'm going to work with in the prettification mode of the Cobra Wand. But first, what I want to do is actually protect the electronics a little more than I have. I'm just going to basically build up some more hot glue to make this a more of an organic shape and to make the switch terminals not quite protrude as much as they do now. So I'm going to build up on the back side here and a little on the front underneath, and then we'll be able to wrap that portion. Alright, cool. So I think I have built this up in a pretty good layer to protect the electrics and to give myself a good, like, organic form. So next, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it. And what I think I'm going to wrap this part in is this piece of faux leather that I've had for a while in my collection. I just kind of like the pattern. It looks like snakeskin. Okay, off camera, I went ahead and removed that bad edge from this scrap of leather. So now it's ready to work with, and I'm just going to do a simple wrap, starting with a point of glue and wrapping spiral flat fashion as tightly as possible without obstructing the switch, all the way from right here where the wood, right before it meets the glue point, and I'm going to go all the way up to here. So I think that came out pretty well. I am going to add a bit more here to this half wrapping, particularly here by the Cobra Head. I think what I'm going to do, because I want this to have a real natural look and feel, is to use hemp twine. So for the hemp twine, I'm not going to use any glue. I'm just going to tie it. So to do that, I'm going to lay first the string this way, and then I'm going to wrap around it all the way down to the bottom so that I can tie it off. Well, I like this a lot. I like the contrast of colors here, and so I'm going to go ahead and do a similar thing at the other end of the handle wrapping, just to give it a nice symmetrical look. Okay, so next I'm going to put an inscription into the wand. This means Silver Birch Fire Serpent. So this is a Silver Birch Fire Serpent. And I've drawn it out there in lead pencil, and now I'm going to use a fat-tipped soldering iron to etch it in. So you may have noticed when I was drilling out the silver birch that there was a slip point where the drill bit emerged from the side when I was coming through at one angle. So to fix this, I've actually practiced the Japanese art of kintsugi, which means golden joinery. It is an ancient practice in which the Japanese would repair broken pottery or vessels with cracks in them with actual gold. So what I've done here is just filled in the portion where the drill bit popped through, and then I have used some gold paint, a gold paint marker, to make that into gold. And I thought this is a perfect opportunity to go further with the fire theme of the fire in the eyes and the fire in the mouth and the fire on the tip for the Fire Serpent, and exploit this as not only golden joinery, but as a part of the artwork itself, as a fire at the foot of the snake witch, the traditional Swedish snake witch from the Swedish stone, snake witch stone. So I have drawn my snake witch here, and I'm going to etch that in next, sitting before this fire. Okay, so to finish off the Snake Witch engraving, on the Snake Witch stone, there is a snake pattern that runs along the edging, and so what I'm going to do is etch that in here, going all the way around to give it kind of an Ouroboros look, and I'm going to do that on both sides of the panels to try to tie everything together here. Okay, so I'm finishing up the etching portion of the wand, and I felt like there was just something missing here on this back panel to balance out my snake witch on the other side. And so I started with the alchemical symbol for silver, followed by the Norse symbols for birch, fire, and serpent. And I thought I would follow this with the symbol for wand. So you have a silver birch fire serpent wand. And, you know, I looked online. I didn't really see a lot of different good options for wands. The best ones I thought that were available were either the caduceus symbol, which is more medicinal, or the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, which is what I chose to go with here because it's more of a magic wand with many different properties. Next, it's time to work on the setting for the tip. And I've got a lot of options here that you can see laid out, things that I considered doing for the wand, some things I've dismissed. At one point I thought I might add a pendulum from the wand, but I've decided not to do that. I do that in some wands and it's cool, and this one does kind of match the color scheme, but I just don't think this one needs a pendulum. It's got so much going on its own that I don't think it really needs that extra touch. As the tip goes, I had thought on several different schemes of color variation. I thought this nice green would look nice, and then I'm planning to put a stone also in the snake's mouth. So I had a smaller green accompanying stone. Tried this out, but this just does not transfer the light as well as I would like it to, so I have rejected this option. I then went towards more clear stones. I've got a lot of options of quartz, a lot of options in citrine, and while those were cool, they just weren't quite the right look either. Next I tried a rose quartz. That looked neat, but still wasn't quite right. I also tried a Super 7, very cool stone. Just not right for this project. Almost forgot, I also have these options. I really thought I was going to go with this. At first, this is Moldavite, very cool glass created from meteorite impact. And then this is a Tektite, a glassy meteorite. Indoctrinite, I believe, is the actual name for this one. But yeah, these didn't pass the test either. I ended up settling on this opal. I think this is going to transfer the light really well. It's got some iridescent properties already in the stone. So yeah, this is what I'm going to go with for the tip. And then for the mouth, I've got this piece of aquamarine, and I think that's going to work really nicely. So let's do those things next. So I've cleared my tray here of my other options for wand tips that are destined for other wands, and it's time to focus on the wand tip for this wand, this beautiful opal. In order to set this, I'm going to need a joining piece, and since I'm working with natural materials in this and I haven't used really any metal on the exterior yet, I decided to use some copper. I've got quite a bit of copper left over from just pieces I've cut for various projects, and it turns out this piece right here with this just gorgeous tarnish, I really like a good patina, fits really nicely. It's almost perfect. It's a little loose, so I'm going to have to build that out over the tip, and we'll also accept that opal quite nicely. So I'm going to mount this part next. Okay, we're getting close. As Adam Savage would say, we are in the room. Next, I want to mount the stone in the mouth. I said this was aquamarine earlier. I was wrong. This is fluorite, and it's going to fit in here. But before I mount it, I actually want to open up a little bit there to let more of the LED glow come out through the mouth. And I want to do a little bit of touch-up work. As I was working, some of the paint got damaged here on the face of the Cobra. So let's do that, and then we'll be ready to reveal the finished product. Okay, for my touch-up paint, I want to use that same original color that I used. So since it was spray paint, I'm going to spray a little puddle into the bottom here that I can work with a tiny paintbrush. Okay, so I cleaned that brush up and I used a little bit of paint thinner because spray paint can be really gunky and nasty, and that brush belongs to my wife and she loves it. So that's nice and clean. Next, now that this paint has dried, we're going to go ahead and set the fluorite in the mouth. So there you have it, the Silver Birch Fire Serpent Wand. I'm pretty pleased with how this came out. Let's shut off the lights so I can show you how well the tip and the eyes glow. I hope you enjoyed this build, and you'll join us next time. Peace.